Well, hello and welcome to what is the 189th episode of the Adoption and Fostering Podcast from the A&amp Network with me, Al Coates, and Scott Casson-Rennie. Hello, Scott.
Good evening, Al Coates. How are you?
I'm coping. I think that's the best way of describing it. I'm coping. Lots of plates have been spun at the moment. So that's me. But I'm not going to the foibles of my domestic joys. Before we go any further, we've got two guests with us. So I think shall we just, I don't think there's any news other than I know one of our guests has a bearing on the recent election, so we'll unpick that as we go. Just as a slight disclaimer, before we did this episode, and people, Scott messaged me and he said, "I just have this feeling I'm going to say something wrong."
Yeah.
So Scott would like to.
No, can I just like
defend
go back
yourself
a little bit, and defend that, because what it is I'm very conscious of language. Okay. You know, white man grown up in Scotland, have lived around the country. I didn't just stay in Scotland, but people like to be referred to differently. I'm very conscious in my space, right. So the LGBTQIA space, that people identify as different things that I don't identify as. So right. I'm always very conscious of language, and especially when we're talking about adoption and fostering as well, because adults who are adopted or who are adopted, they like to be called by different kind of, they identify as different things. So I'm very conscious of my own language. So if I do say anything that doesn't fit, then feel free to pick me up. It's not intentional. That's what I wanted to say.
I'm more than happy to pick you up. So before we go any further then, so straight to the point, with me today, I have James and Sarah from Replenish Culture. And without any ado, would you like to introduce yourselves and tell us who you are and what you do? So I'll start with you, Sarah. Ladies first.
Hi, my name's Sarah Livingstone. I'm a foster carer. I've been a foster carer for near enough 10 years. I'm also the chair of CAF, which is Camden Association for Foster Carers.
Oh.
And and I'm also a co-founder of Replenish Culture CIC. So in my role as a foster carer, I have children in placement, but I also make sure that my foster carers, I say my foster carers because I feel they are mine. My foster carers are well supported, and I advocate for them in everything really when it comes to their fostering journey. And that means that I get a really unique insight into how they're feeling, whether it's vulnerability or unsupported. And I think this is one of the reasons why me and James collaborated to build the platform Replenish Culture.
Excellent. That's a cracking introduction, and I've already got a range of questions. Lots of questions, always questions. And I think you're a friend of the show, but I'll maybe talk about that later. James, tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, so firstly, I'm really excited to be here, guys. So I'm James Kargbo. I'm a social worker, and I managed a fostering service where I met the lovely Sarah. And Replenish Culture was kind of born out of my time in that space.
You both know friend of the show, Blair Mortimer, don't you?
Yes,
shout out to Blair.
Very well.
He's a legend.
How do we do this? Go.
Give the double thumbs and you get the. Not that anyone can see this because this is didn't work at all. So really, I bumped into you guys at an event in the autumn of last year, late summer, autumn, in terms of Adoption England were running events. So you were talking about, and you had a stall and we had a brief chat, and that's kind of how we ended up here. So I'm not really sure where to start because it feels like it's such a huge area. Can you tell me, maybe in terms of the statistics, I may be putting you on the spot in terms of the number of children of colour, black children, mixed ethnicity children. Can you kind of paint us a picture of what this looks like in London and further afield?
Sure. So nationally, black children make up 8% of the care population, but they actually only make up 5% of the population. So they're overrepresented in the care system.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that demands a question. What's that all about then?
Wow.
Oh, you need more than an hour there.
Well, just go for it.
That one, definitely.
Well, I'll say a few things and Sarah will build on it. But I think you have to look at socioeconomic factors. So research tells us that actually Black children are more likely to live in housing situations where there's higher levels of deprivation. In social work, we talk a lot about the toxic trio. So that's domestic violence, substance misuse, and mental health problems. And we know that in areas of sort of high deprivation, low socioeconomic status, there's a kind of prevalence sometimes of those issues. So sometimes it's about that. I think another factor is race, racism. I think that, when assessments are being carried out, you might be a social worker, maybe assessing a Black family. Sometimes there's a bit of a culture clash there. Sometimes there's other barriers that present disadvantage to those families. It could be around how they perceive those services. Maybe they clam up, they don't see them as a supportive service. So I think there's a whole range of factors behind those statistics, really. Sarah, I don't know if you'd add anything.
Yeah, also, I think there's a mistrust around Black families when it comes to social services. I think professional intervention is something that causes that mistrust, whether it's any sort of organisation that has authority, because over years we know, just if we look at the police service, we know that it's been very difficult for Black families to deal with organisations like that. So anybody who's coming in from a professional point of view that has the power, obviously, to possibly remove your children, they're automatically going to be on the back foot when it comes to, intervention. But everything else, it's a little bit of a build up of everything. I think that lower paid jobs, and ultimately, I would say an understanding of different cultures.
But I just I've just dug up some more stats that I want to just kind of read out here. And some of it are quite harrowing, but I'm going to read them. So Black men and boys are 43 times more likely to be stopped and searched using Section 60, which allows the police to stop people without suspicion that a crime has actually taken place. Black children are 11 times more likely to be strip searched in England and Wales than their white peers. What else have we got here? We know that Black males are kind of more likely to be sort of sectioned under the Mental Health Act as well. So I think what we're talking about here really is this proportionality that kind of goes beyond children's services and is a societal issue, really. So really, Replenish Culture is us doing our little bit with a very specific context. Fostering has been my baby, if you like. Since I qualified as a social worker, I've always just been absolutely blown away by the work of foster carers. And really, I had the privilege of managing a fostering service, which was a real career highlight for me. But it was an education, it's an education. And I came very familiar with some dynamics that exist in that space. And again, it's dynamics that I think are specific to local authorities, which is too much work, not enough resource. So, we ask a lot of foster carers, and I think our offer of support needs to evolve. It really does need to evolve. And Replenish Culture is a courageous movement to kind of do a bit more in that space.
Can I ask, sorry, I was going to ask a question that sort of may inform your origins, really, which is in terms of, you stated there that 8% of children who are 8% of children who are fostered are Black. And what does the ethnicity of the foster care kind of community look like in terms of that number? Is there enough Black foster carers to look after enough Black children. That was a really crap way of asking that
No,
question.
it's not. It's
I mean,
not
I'm sure
out.
James
It's not
can
a
say
crap
the
way.
statistics, but we know that the majority of Black children are actually fostered by white carers.
Well, I think if we go back a little bit and ask ourselves what actually is fostering, you know, and fostering in its simplest form is welcoming a child into your home, into your family, you know, and we mustn't lose sight of the fact that that's a privilege. You have to be in a relatively privileged position to be able to do that. It costs a lot to raise a child. It requires a lot of time. It requires care. And I think that it's something that we need a diverse cohort of people able to do it. But at the moment, that isn't the case. And what that means is that typically children in care will encounter a white foster family.
Also, I think, as James touched on economics as well, a lot of Black families won't have that extra space within their home, because of economics, because they're not the highest paid in society, So I think if you look at that, and as a foster carer myself, that I'm Black and I come from a Black family as well. I don't know anyone within my family, and there's a lot of us, anyone else that fosters apart from me.
So, I mean, it begs the question then, because I'm thinking back a couple of years now when a job that I was in, and there was a recruitment drive, if you like, to recruit Muslim adopters because there wasn't enough of that ethnicity and religion to be able to take on children who were coming into the system. And what is the solution to these issues? I mean, is there a simple solution, or is it just something that would, if you find somebody who has the space and who has the finances and who has the kind of the confidence to do this, is that the solution, or is it kind of wider than that?
I think you're touching a bit on some of the answers. I think some of it is around awareness raising. I think some of it is also about, I think a key jigsaw piece is building trust, perhaps with communities where historically there's been low levels of trust with quote unquote the system, and I think a big part of this is that maybe, families from certain communities are kind of socialized to maybe stay away from the system, whether that's the police or that's the local authority or teachers, whoever it may be. So I think that there's some work to be done in that space. Maybe some restorative work around actually what is the job of the local authority. And as well, I think fostering and to a degree adoption is a little bit in the shadows. It's a very misunderstood area of society. There's a lot of people that don't know the difference between fostering and adoption.
Yeah, that's true.
Often it's kind of convoluted as one thing when actually it's quite different. So I think it's a complex question to tackle. I don't think it's straightforward. I think if it was, maybe we would have been a bit further along in the journey.
Yeah.
I mean, some people would even argue.
Sorry, I also think that there's a platform as well for foster carers that are doing it from the Black and Muslim backgrounds that, I think local authorities could do a lot more, giving them a platform to actually let people know, because this is one of the things that as the chair of Camden, I've pushed for, that we need to be at the stalls when local authority have got their stalls out and they want to talk to people. Let's have a social worker and a foster carer, not just two social workers. Let's get them out there. Let's tell them the good and the bad and the ugly. Because and get into places that already do the caring stuff, whether it's schools, it's teachers, it's nurses and stuff like that, and actually speak directly to the public about fostering, because I do think, as James said, it's an unsung hero thing that doesn't get picked up on a lot. It's not sexy enough, is it? We're dealing with traumatized children. There's no sort of like flamboyance in it. Nobody really wants to touch it. It's a bit of a hot potato. Because they know that the system's failing, but they know to actually fix that it's going to cost them millions and millions of pounds. So they really don't want to go anywhere near it. And I think this is one of the things, with Keir Starmer, trying to get a meeting with him, got a meeting with him, and then was told, oh, sorry, you're put to the back burner because he's running to be prime minister.
Yeah.
So, I do think that we need to get out there. I think foster carers need to be encouraged to get out there, to have them conversations with the public, to explain what fostering is about. Because you know what? I've been doing it for 10 years. I wish I'd done it 10 years before. I wish I was 20 years in the game, because the differences that I've made in children's life is huge. My family, and it's not just me who fosters, it's my family that foster. I don't think you can foster on your own, and the difference that we make to children is it's beyond what I could have ever thought that I could have done, so I think we can say the bad bits, and a lot of the bad bits to me is sometimes dealing with the system, but the children, that's the good bit.
Yeah. But if you're working from a basis of you've got issues with the system already, then you're going to be less likely to want to engage even into the future, whether it's for a good thing or a bad thing. It doesn't really matter, does it? It's that, like you were saying earlier, the mistrust that's already there, and that has to be improved before you can then go on to that kind of thing, I guess. Yeah. Wow.
Fostering is fascinating, and I full disclosure, Scott was a foster carer.
I did it once and I ended up adopting the child, so I couldn't do that again because I already had 3 children then at that stage, and I thought, no.
He was a terrible
I'm only
foster carer.
35, believe it or not, so it's like
in your dreams. And I was interested, and because the reality is then that we've got a whole cohort of children who are being raised by people who they don't see their sort of ethnicity mirrored in their carers. And I was thinking, well, if I was to have this conversation down the pub, I'm curious as to what I'm talking about the pub near where I live in Northumberland, which is the whitest, I think the second whitest county in England. So it's like 99% white British. They would be probably a lot of people would go, well, so what? Kids are kids.
Yeah.
But I don't hold that view, just to be clear. But so what's the worst kind of case scenario? What are the things that you've seen that you've gone, oh my goodness, that's people just haven't understood the specific needs of this group of children? And was that the spark that inspired you to create Replenish?
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous narrative to kind of just say kids are kids, because I think that, in its simplest form, I think raising a Black child is unique to raising any other child, really, because of the levels of racism that exist in society. Yeah. And as a parent now, one of my jobs is to prepare my daughter for society. And we know that society at the moment has issues with race. It's a legacy of colonialism, if we want to go all the way back. There's still stereotypes out there. There's racial bias out there. So I think as a parent, you have to prepare your child for that as a Black parent. And I think this is where, in answer to the so what, this is where actually, if you're a foster carer or you're an adopter, it's very important that you find a way to tune in to the Black experience. And that can be quite a humbling task. It can be something that takes a number of years to fully kind of get to grips with. I think in the case of foster carers, we don't necessarily have a number of years because the child is in their care like yesterday at 5 o'clock, So as a department, this is where we have to think outside the box around how to kind of bridge any potential shortfall. Now, some of that might be around training. Some of that might be around a supervising social worker who's courageous enough to bring up that conversation. But one way or another, we have to arrive at a place whereby the hot potato that is race is on the table, and we begin to unpeel that potato, and whether we're going to boil it or fry it or whatever we're going to do, but we have to start to kind of get to grips with it, because I just think that, I've heard a lot from care experienced adults who were in the care system in the 70s, the 80s and the 90s. And I think the detrimental impact of their sort of identity being ignored is really quite profound, because when you're in care, you already have the dynamic of you've been removed from your home. So in some way, you already feel a sense of abandonment. You feel a sense of rejection. Now you add the racial layer on top of that, and it's just it's another big aspect that can take many, many years to kind of come to terms with. So you're dealing with the discrimination we know that care experience people can have to go through, but also racism as well. So in answer to your question, I think the so what is that it's a part of someone's identity. It's a part of their world positioning. And it's important that their caregivers can be that safe space to kind of help them to understand that a bit more.
I think we've moved away from like heads on a pillow and food in a belly when it comes to fostering. I think we need to be a little bit more sort of feed into what the child's needs are. And I think being the chair, and as I said in the beginning of all of this, that I get a unique conversation with foster carers about how they're feeling, because they open up to me, because obviously I am a foster carer. And I think what I was finding, one of the reasons why me and James sort of pushed for Replenish Culture, is because I was finding that a lot of foster carers, white foster carers, were feeling quite vulnerable when it came to looking after Black children or mixed heritage children. And there was even the questions that were going around was like, can I do that? And that put a chill up me, thinking, well, you know, we've got a high majority of Black and mixed heritage children coming into the care system. And then we've also got white foster carers that are questioning whether they can meet them child's needs. Now, I totally understand that, because what was on offer at the time was not adequate for the foster carer to be able to meet the child's needs. So this is where me and James had built a relationship over many years, as him being a supervising social worker and then the fostering manager. And then me being, I think it was vice chair and then chair. We'd built a relationship over many years talking about Black, what we need to do better for our children, for our foster carers, and having them open conversations about what it was to be Black in you know, local authority, and what we needed to push the boundaries. And I think we realised that if we didn't do it, no one was going to do it. So, you know, the collaboration between me and James grew from that, but also an understanding that we needed some sort of support mechanism put in place to help the foster carers, the adopters, to be able to meet the needs of the children, because it is a different dynamic that you have to come from as a foster carer, as a parent, as an adopter, to meet the needs of a Black or mixed heritage child, because there is real rooted deep conversations that need to come from that. And, you know, the same conversations as a mother that I would have with my son who's Black, you know, there's certain ways that he has to carry himself when he's out in public, that he's not going to be victimized because he's Black, you know. And these are conversations that I want, you know, Mary down the road to have with Tunde, that's in her care, you know, to have them conversations to keep our children safe as well. And to also, I suppose, invest and have an understanding of somebody's culture and identity, because ideally what we want our children to do is to love themselves. Yeah. And if they can't mirror that in the home that they're in, or the books that they read, or the stuff on telly, you know, the other day we saw something, you know, about the young boy that had with the sword, and it was Sword Boy in the papers. You know, this is how they said that this boy had, you know, been murdered, was Sword Boy. You know, the way that they write about Black and mixed heritage people and the media, this is what our children are reading, they're being indoctored with. And it's in the home that we need to change that vision. We need to change the understanding of what our children see, what they love about themselves, and embrace their culture and their beauty, because our children are beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I find this a really fascinating conversation, and I've got so many questions and sort of reflections. Just full disclosure, I'm an adoptive parent to 3 mixed children. And so there's so many ways we could go down there. But what I'm really encouraged by this conversation is we've not at no point mentioned children's hair. And I think that it can so often be reduced down to this, which is important, you know, not to diminish children's hair and, you know, skin and that care, but actually there's so much more to this conversation than those sort of or I once gave my daughter plantain and she cried. But that's my daughter. She doesn't like mashed potato either. And so I think there's a much more nuanced conversation that people need to be having, and with the children that they're caring for, if they don't reflect the same ethnicity. That one of the things that I really one of the questions I was going to ask you about in terms was how does the system manage this? Because the system just is, if it's using a spreadsheet, it goes put child X in home Y, problem sorted. And it's sort of, does it pay lip service to matching in terms of ethnicity? On a Friday night, you've been a fostering manager. On a Friday night, you've got a child and you've got a bed. How much weight can the system give to ethnicity in terms of fostering?
Well, I think the final part of your question is the most pertinent.
Yeah.
How much weight can the system give? I think there's the theoretical intention. We always look to match racially if it's possible. But the reality is we don't have the level of resource there to always be able to do that. And sometimes it is about a bed, who can take this child, and that's where, again, it's on us to kind of give our foster carers the right tools so that they can do their best. But it won't always be possible to kind of racially match placements or even adoptive placements.
Yeah.
But I think also, that the reason why we came up with the Replenish Culture box that has hair and skin products in it is because it is a fantastic opener to any conversation around race, whether it is with social workers, with foster carers, with adopters, with schools, with anyone who wants to listen. It's a fantastic opener because you open up this box, which is really beautifully presented. The logo on the box was made by Black and Mixed Heritage, looked after children on 2 different workshops. We held workshops and they came up with the logo, beautifully coloured. And it's a way of handing something over that is really profound, and then opening up the box and then saying, oh yeah, by the way, have you thought about recipes, books, outings, family members, these things? What are you doing for this child? Where are you covering other needs that this child has, rather than just skin and hair? Skin and hair is so important because, as we know, I can always tell when a child I feel is not doing too well is the way that they're presented. I will look at a child, a Black child, a mixed heritage child, and think, their hair looks a bit dry, or they look a bit dry here and whatever. And it's a horrible thing, but I can literally spot a child that's maybe not being looked after by their family because they're not being presented. And it's not the foster care or the adopter's fault. We're asking them to speak another language, because if you don't come up in that community and you don't have people that mirror that child, you're asking people to pull information. There's a lot of stuff out there, but a lot of it is very much, you've got to pick what you need and what is relative to your child. So I think the box was definitely something. I came up with the box, took it to James, and James ran with it. He saw the potential in it, saw it was an amazing thing, got it out to our foster carers. But it's grown legs and arms from the box. It's an amazing conversational piece to actually have the conversations like what we're having with you guys now, a more deeper conversation about race and identity.
Yeah. I massively wish I'd had that, because I look back on my understanding from day one versus my eldest daughter's 19 now, one of my eldest mixed daughter, and I realized that it changed my family, and it changed the family. It didn't just. It wasn't just this child. It impacted on aunties and uncles and the whole network in a way that I just hadn't anticipated. And I wish someone had sort of really asked me much, held my feet to the fire in a way that I didn't even know existed.
I was just gonna say, when you, like Sarah said, when you open the box, you're opening the conversation. We were really clear from the very beginning that this was not just about hair and skin, but it was important to start with hair and skin because it's about appearance. And this construct that we have come to know as race is about appearance. You know, how we know the difference between a black person and a white person is the eye test. We look at them and we kind of make that assumption of, well, we make 101 assumptions, right? So it was important to start with that. I suppose the other sort of aspect with all of this we were beginning to get complaints. So sometimes it would be staff would observe a child. Other times it would be, you know, a black child would go to contact, see their birth family, and the birth family would then pull us up afterwards and said, you know, I really wasn't happy about my child's appearance. And so it was really complicated because here you have a birth parent who's had their child removed because, for want of a better wording, they couldn't look after them, complaining about the level of care being provided by a foster carer, you know. So it was trying to tackle that one was, you know, don't throw stones when you live in a glass house type of thing. But we had to kind of find that balance. And it was about actually, well, why don't we do something proactively to kind of just make this a non-issue? Why don't we kind of give some practical support, but also open the door to other possibilities?
Yeah. And I guess in some ways that sorry, Sarah.
I was just going to say, I also think with foster carers, you know, when you do get them complaints coming, it is really soul destroying.
Yeah.
You know, because you're doing the best that you can, and there's just one element that you just don't know about, that you're trying to get the best outcome for your child when it comes to skin and hair, and you're not sure what you should be using. And I think, you know, for Replenish Culture to take that burden away, where it's one stop all shop, is what we want. We want it to build a community around foster carers, adopters, that they feel that they can go to Replenish. And there are people, it's not just me and James, there's a team of 4 of us, you know, and we have a skin and hair educator on the team that will talk to any foster carer, any adopter, if they're struggling.
Yeah. And I was just going to say as well that surely there's an element of responsibility lying at the agency's door as well with all of this, because if, you know, I get that, you know, there aren't enough, you know, carers to match the ethnicity of a child. But if you're going to play, you know, I'm just thinking of people making complaints against foster carers, and then the foster carer being investigated for something actually that they haven't had the support or the educating to be able to do. I mean, that's quite a clanger really to be dropped, isn't it? You know, from an agency perspective as well.
Scott, I've sat on quite a few sort of like meetings with obviously advocating for the foster carers, and I've sat on meetings with foster carers that have been pulled up time and time again about the presentation of their child. And, you know, sometimes it's warranted, but other times it's sort of like, you know, okay, and I'll have the foster carer turn to me and say, but I just don't have the resources, I don't know. And also you have to think of finance as well, because the products for Black and mixed heritage children is a lot more expensive than Head and Shoulders or Timotei or any of the other brands. It's, you know, if you go to any Superdrug and you look, the products are 3-4 times more expensive. So financially, there's a way up as well for the foster carer. Like, do I take this child that is Black, who's gonna cost me a lot more money when it comes to how much product they use on the skin, what they use on their hair, and everything like that, compared to a white child that is literally going to the hairdressers maybe every 3 months or something like that. It's not costing them that much money, you know. So there's a way up as well financially. So I suppose what me and James tried to do is to take that, because our boxes in Camden, the Camden Replenish boxes, they are replenished, so they can go to their supervising social worker and ask for more products,
right,
and it doesn't come out of the foster carer's pocket.
Wow, that's
perfect.
That's a positive, I think.
Yeah.
I do think this is a fascinating issue, and I think Scott's right in terms of preparation. I'll not say where, but I heard adopters describing terms of who they'd like to be placed with, or children that they'd like to be matched with. And sort of there was this little caveat at the bottom, but if that didn't work out, they would be willing to consider a child of a different ethnicity. And I kind of like went,
yeah,
oh, hang on. That feels like that, you know, in adoption terms, that they're, again, black and mixed children are overrepresented within the the children available for adoption, but they're not actually at representation within terms of people waiting to adopt. And you kind of think that's a really peculiar system when we're not even knowing what questions to ask adoptive parents, prospective adoptive parents. And I don't know whether you feel comfortable commenting on that, and whether should we be letting
James has some, I'm sure James has statistics on that, because Black and mixed heritage children spend a lot more time in the care waiting for adopters than their counterparts.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know as well that 89% of approved adopters are white and only 3% are Black. So like that's the context behind this, the stats Sarah just spoke about, you know. Black and mixed heritage children wait a lot longer to achieve a permanent home. So it is definitely another angle to all of this that kind of fast tracks the need to have some additional support in that place.
Yeah, I mean, you would think it's someone like Replenish would be, you would just sign adopters up to that, wouldn't you? You would think that would be a really, I mean, I'm not, you know, I am trying to build your business. But in terms of that, I look at the stuff that you're doing, and I think that on a really basic level, I just need to know about skincare, you know, because it's not black skin isn't white skin, you know, it's just, you know, it seems so obvious, but but the impact on my child of having skin that hurts or is uncomfortable is really a big deal. But then going on as time went on, actually, like having someone I can talk to about as a white parent saying, you need to help my child navigate racism, because I'm just, you know, never in my life have I experienced racism and probably won't, you know, it's just not going to happen. So it feels like it is so much more than just the conversation starter. So have you had links into adoptive services that adopt? Are they keen to sort of pick up on what you're doing?
They are. So we've worked with like Adoption UK. They've been very sort of on board with what we're doing, and we've done webinars for them, and Core and Bath, we've done a bit with them. But, you know, we've only actually been going as our kind of independent iteration since July of last year. So we're still very early, but Sarah and I, we do get a lot of interesting emails from adopters. We had one today even, you know, that was a kind of like help me type of email. So it's fascinating. The need is out there, and the need is really high. I think we need to get in front of as many people as we can, you know, and just kind of really push this message, you know, because it is about starting the conversation, and we can give support, but we need our adopters and our foster carers to kind of build on that. Once the door is open, they need to kind of build on that and continue to create that safe space. And on the training we deliver, we talk a lot about how to actually support a child who's opening up about their experience of racism, you know, how to validate those feelings and how to not kind of, you know, pour petrol, you know, on that. And Sarah, I know you've had some experience with this.
I was going to say, so, you know, with my own children, my children are Black, I'm mixed heritage. And I realized, I think quite a few years ago, my son is coming up to 40 now. And quite a few years ago, I needed to go to the toilet, and I pulled over and just went into a pub. Any pub, just needs to go to the toilet. And my son was like, I need to go to the toilet. And I was like, I'm going to the pub. He's like, I'm not going in there. Not going in there. No. And I was like, why? And he was like, because Mum, you have privilege. You can go in there as a woman and a mixed heritage woman. I'm a Black man. As soon as I walk in there, I've literally got a thing on my back, you know. And I was really quite taken back. And then I had to take a minute and think to myself, well, hold on a minute. He's so right. Because I am mixed race, I am privileged that there's nowhere that I feel like I can't go.
Yeah.
But my son and my daughter don't feel that way. So then that was something that I had to think about myself, about race. I mean, I've always had them conversations with my children about race and about how they conduct themselves. And that, you know, as a man, I say it all the time, take your bass out of your voice because people will think you're being aggressive, you know, and sort of, I suppose, for a better word, conditioning him, because I can't condition the world.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to condition him to stay safe. So I think with race, it's something that I suppose as a mixed heritage person, I've dealt with my own identity issues coming up in my teens. I was brought up by a white mum, didn't have a black dad around, didn't look the same as everybody else in my family, and that. And when I think I hit my teens, it was huge for me. I had no idea who I was. Didn't know if I could even call myself black. Do I have a right to call myself black? Am I going to offend people if I call myself black? You know, all of these different things. And I think when it comes to race, it's difficult. And I think we're asking our foster carers that are coming from a different background to understand racism, how it affects our children. I have a child in placement now where I am literally battling with the school to get them to understand that what he's going through on 3 different occasions is bullying, racism. And it's this feely thing where he gets removed from the class rather than the child gets removed from the class. Touchy-feely stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear it. I'm not sitting in the meeting here where you feel that you can sort of like gaslight me. I know exactly what my child's going through and you need to deal with it. What is your policy? And I think it's about calling it out. I think it's about the child seeing you call it out. Because I think that is one of the big things. If you can show the child that it's okay to call it out. If you feel that somebody has, you know, said something to you or acted a certain way, that you have a right to call it out and say, you know what, this is no good. This doesn't, you know, that you are being racist to me, or you are, you know, and it's these little aggressions. I'm sure James can tell you these little microaggressions that go on within the workforce and in school. And my foster child's only 9. You know, he's and he's dealt with it. He's dealt with it. I've had some. He came home and he asked me, because one of the kids in school had turned around. A white child had said to him, "Black people don't earn as much money as white people, so you're never going to be what you think you're going to be." And I had to sit down and unpick that with him, and not sell him a dream, but also explain to him that things are changing. You know, that might have been what it was like before, but things are changing, and there are people that you can look at around you that have accomplished amazing stuff, you know, and they are black and they look like you. So it's about, I suppose, understanding and be able to have them conversations where it's a safe space. The child can come and talk to you about certain things, and you understand what you need to give that child. To show them it's okay to call it out, explain to them how things are changing. It's slowly changing, but it is changing, so that you give them hope. And then also making sure that the child is kept safe in all of this. Having them conversations about how the child conducts themselves when they're out in you know, in society.
And that's fascinating, because my daughter, one of my daughters, who was she had a gang of friends, and she's the only mixed girl in there. But we live in, as I said, a hugely, just a overwhelming majority white community. And they were all going to the shops. And, you know, I'm not naive. A group of teenage girls in shops, right? They're just, it's like a pack of, you know, these teenage girls. And I said, you just need to know that if anything goes down, you will be the one that they remember.
Yeah.
And I said, and they will go to the local high school and they'll say, well, there was a black girl, and because there's 2 of you, they will pick you out. And and it felt awful thing to do, to sort of to frame her, you know, she's beautiful in a way that actually means that people are going to remember you for the wrong reasons. And she was like, "Oh, Dad, man, you're stupid." But I said, you need to remember that your people will remember you for the wrong reasons. So you've got to be squeaky clean. I mean, I want you to be squeaky clean anyway.
Yeah.
So complicated conversations, and you got to think ahead, haven't you?
I mean, that there, Al, is exactly, you know, earlier on in our conversations, I said that, you know, parenting a black child is just, it's completely different. And that's exactly what I was referring to. that story you just gave there, because that's exactly what my mum said to me growing up, and my dad said to me growing up, is that you will be judged differently. You will be judged more harshly. And in a way, it's a very difficult messaging to hear as a child, because in a way, what you're hearing is that
you're different.
The more normal privileges you usually get to enjoy as a child, making a few more mistakes, being a bit more silly, the usual childhood grace doesn't really apply to you. It's quite difficult to hear that, and I think this is a particular nuance that we want our foster carers to appreciate, and our adopters.
Yeah. I apologize, Scott. I feel like I've butted into all your questions.
No, it's fine. I'm used to it by now.
Don't get your pet lip on.
No, it was just something, Sarah, you said there a minute ago, and I'm thinking, without giving overconfidence, I guess those conversations that you have to have gives them a little bit of confidence to be able to advocate for themselves and potentially for others in the future. If you can kind of share that not confidence, but share those those ways of thinking about it, of what can happen if this, all that sort of stuff. And I'm just thinking about the potential confidence that gives a child and being able to advocate for themselves appropriately, without being the one, without being the screaming, shouting child that, ends up feeling that, they're maybe not being, let's just, as an example, say they're maybe not being bullied, but they're picking up that it's a similar feeling that they're getting. And so therefore they claim the bullying or the racism card when it's not that. I'm not saying it would be, but what I'm trying to say, it's like giving them the confidence to know that actually you can advocate for yourself appropriately. But I guess there's another layer on top of that, isn't there, when it comes to the kind of the racism that they're going to experience, not just in childhood, but for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I sort of, when my foster child was going through an issue, he's still going through it at the moment, but when he was going through an issue, I sort of said, look, he, a couple of years ago, he would have probably dealt with that completely different and probably got into a serious fight with the perpetrator.
Yeah.
He actually brought it to a member of staff. He brought it to me, and now we need to act on it.
Yeah.
He is saying A, B, and C has happened. If he doesn't see that we act on it, he's going to act on it himself. And that is the concern that I have, because you're not actually seeing the problem. You're going to see the outburst and deal with my foster child negatively because you haven't dealt with the problem in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and this is what I've said to the school and everybody else. I'm told the social workers know, everybody knows what I'm dealing with. And I'm like, because when it is that you say, oh, he's done A, B, and C, I'm going to say, well, hold on a minute. He's been telling you for months that this has been going on. Why have you not done what you need to do?
Yeah.
It's really difficult. It's so difficult. And also to keep his spirits up, for him not to feel, to take any of the sort of like, there was a comment where they were doing some work around Egypt. And this child called him out in class because the teacher turned around and said, why do you think the soil is that much darker around the Nile in Egypt? And he turned around and said, oh, dark like, and called my foster child's name. And everyone laughed in class. And he came home and told me this, and they removed him from class. And I was like, what? Sorry? And I was like, and I was literally like, I said to the headmistress, I'm not the one. I'm not just going to smile politely and think that you've dealt with it, because as far as I'm concerned, you haven't. So you now need to show me how you're dealing with it.
Absolutely.
But I think, we need to make sure that our children know that it's okay to call it out. No, it's okay to seek help rather than retaliating, because we are ultimately dealing with traumatized children. Absolutely. And trauma can actually impact on being quite aggressive when it's not dealt with properly.
Absolutely. And I can, it's probably not the same, but it's a similar example. Two gay dads, we've got 3 sons, they can all stick up for themselves. But the number of times, and it wasn't a lot, but we had to go into school a lot and kind of pick them up on things that were said and done. And I always remember my middle son who, I mean, he's not a boxer, but he does like to use his fists if he doesn't, if he's frustrated, shall we say. Yeah, and he did use his fists one day, and he was the one that we got a phone call about, and I said, okay, so let's just rewind here. Let's go back to when we came in on this day, and this day, and this day, and you've not dealt with it. So actually, no, he's not going to be going to detention, or he's not going to be carrying out the exclusion that you'd given to him, because actually you've not dealt with it. So, you can suck it up, cupcakes. That's what I said. But anyway, I mean, I know it's not the same, but it's a kind of similar thing. No. And because he'd come to the end of his tether with it, because he's gone, well, nobody's helping me, so I'm going to sort it myself. So bang, fist to the
parallels
face.
Are the advocacy skills, aren't they? That ability
Absolutely.
to go in and to sort of be able to kind of articulate something in a way that you're advocating and protecting your child.
Absolutely.
And trying to educate the people around, the people around them as well. Unfortunately, I fear it's an issue that we'll not resolve. As you say, we're at the start of that, but we're a way off, aren't we? And so what are your aspirations? I mean, you've told us what you're doing. What are your plans for growth? What would be in 5 years' time? Where would you be?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I want us to transcend sort of children's services, fostering, adoption, and get into schools, get into prisons, get into, I think, any space really. We have been able to do a bit of that in some of the work we've done, but we want this conversation to be a far-reaching one. But I just want to go back a little bit, because it just occurred to me that actually this weekend just gone was the 4-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And that really was the catalyst, I would say, for the work we've been doing. So I think if I had a magic wand and could have some bearing on shaping the future, it would just be really to make sure that that sort of thing doesn't happen anymore. Because I think in that moment, you had parents all across the world who probably had to explain those scenes to their young person. And I think that was quite tragic, really. But I just really hope that, this beautiful project that has emerged from that really goes as far as possible in kind of shaping a new future.
Yeah.
I think what we've done so far is, in like a year, we have been to Parliament, we've been to all sorts of places on the Replenish bus, as you might as well say, the Replenish Culture bus. And we've been in front of some amazing people. I think one of the things that I will take away from what we've done in the last year is the amount of work that is going on. I think I never realised that there was so much work going on behind the scenes to deal with culture and identity and empowering our foster carers, our foster children in that space. But I think going forward, I would love to have, I've always said this, I would love to in time maybe have a school that is sort of like as a Saturday, where we have children coming and they're learning together, and they have this, that they can see each other in that space, and it's more of a community. It's more of a, that people think, oh, let's see what's on the agenda with Replenish Culture this next couple of months. Are they doing something in, I don't know, in a festival? Are they going to be here? Are they got to stand here? What are we doing? And then also the training that we're doing is getting us in front of social workers, managers and stuff like this to start thinking about what they need to do within their space to make sure that they're looked after children. They're the corporate parent at the end of the day. What they're doing, how are they supporting their foster carers to be able to have these conversations? Because I'm sure James can tell you, social workers find talking about race uncomfortable as well.
Yeah.
So it's about being able to have the conversations, and it is a hot potato. Just like, Scott, you mentioned before we started the podcast that sometimes you can feel like, it's a cancel society and you say the wrong word and all of a sudden it's what's what Scott said was out. And I think it's about taking the fear away. This is what Replenish Culture try and do. It's a safe space to have them conversations, to ask the questions that you're not sure about, and not feel that you're going to be penalized because of it.
Yeah.
But also for Replenish Culture to be a one-stop shop where people will come to us looking for advice, education, training, foster carers training, and that we can offer that wholly. So that's where I would like to be.
So basically, you want to take over the world, Sarah. That's what you're saying.
And I can do it from my laptop, Scott. I'm telling you now.
Do you know what? That does not surprise me, to be honest.
Yeah. James is just hanging on for dear life, I think.
Yeah. He's like...
She's a force. She's a force. Yeah,
she's a force. I as you were talking, both of you, I was thinking that this is a message. I mean, London is it's a world city. It's the diversity is just it's so rich, and I just thought this is a message for the regions, isn't it? Really, that's what I look at my local authority where it's predominantly white, but there's still those children, but the skill set's just not as prevalent. So I would love to see you in, across the regions, into the nooks and crannies of, the West Country and the North Country and the in-between country. Because I think you've got so much to offer, especially adoptive parents, all parents, but I think there's so much you could do to support adoptive parents and foster carers as well.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I think that, anybody who's listening to this podcast as well, if they think, well, and like, Al, you've just shared there where you live, and I have been to where Al lives, and honestly, they still, some of them don't even wear shoes where he lives. It's that bad. But
even the rats wear overalls where I live.
Is Al one of those people that doesn't wear shoes? 30
minutes outside of London, aren't you, Scott?
Yeah, honestly,
I don't wear shoes. No,
I don't think it matters where you are in the country. I think that this sort of stuff you need to know. So if someone in a local authority is going, well, this doesn't affect us. Actually, it potentially could, even if it doesn't right now. Be prepared rather than having to do it. Be proactive rather than reactive to stuff like that. And actually, no different to when single people could adopt and foster, and LGBT people, all that sort of stuff. Be proactive about it. Don't wait until it happens and then you go, oh, maybe we should have done something about that. I think it's. I mean,
get ahead of it.
That'd be my message anyway, definitely. And, I say that from where I live, because I don't live in the UK anymore. I live in Ireland, but, I lived in Ireland in the early thousands, and the population was Irish and Eastern European. There was a lot of Eastern Europeans there. There was not one person of color at all in the area that I live in. I live in the same area as I did back then. Yeah. And now, especially having a 17-year-old who goes to school here, I would say probably 70% of his friendship group, not his school, but 70% of his friendship group are people of color. Mm. And when I was here, there was not one person of color. And I mean, not one. I cannot remember one person. So times are changing, and I feel even you might want to think about Ireland as well, because there's a lot going here on here as well.
An offer, Scott?
Always, I have an organisation here. We can sort that out. Yeah, no problem. Come over.
We're doing some work with with an organisation called We Are Irish.
No, it's called I Am Irish. Don't butcher their name.
Sorry.
Oh, crikey. Cut that out. Maybe
I Am Irish.
I Am Irish, right?
Yeah. And the lady that we've been doing some work with, she is amazing. She's mixed heritage, and she's just come on board and loves what we're doing. We love what she's doing as
Absolutely.
Well. It's just about bringing, as I said before, it's like the people that we've met while we've been doing Replenish Culture is just, honestly, it's an eye-opener. I thought I knew quite a lot, but I really don't, and what people are doing behind the scenes, I think, is just tremendous.
Yeah. Well,
it's incredibly humbling. It really is. And I think for us, we don't position ourselves as experts. We're facilitators. We're people who know how to create a safe space to have the discussion. But actually, we continue to learn on this journey. And we've learned in this conversation today. And I think there's something about positioning, and Scott, you said it a few minutes ago. It's about being open to learning something. I think, you just can't go wrong when you do that.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so my final question, maybe depends how good your answer is.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all.
Making us work for the money, aren't you?
Oh yeah. Don't build your hopes up there.
I
You
thought
might
we were
get
going to get off early. Do you know what I mean?
you might get
Really dark, but no, ours on the board.
yeah, you might get a WH Smith vouchers from 1985 that I found in an old Beano. I was thinking that because obviously it's quite clear it's children of color. It's black children and mixed children. But there's outside of that there is another group of children, isn't it, where their ethnicity is different. You know, brown children, children from Asia. Different, in Asia, there's huge expanse in terms of culture and nationality. Is that something that you are? Because I looked at the language and it felt like very specifically you're not talking about them. But is that something that is there a reason for that, or is that something you're looking to sort of incorporate?
I mean, it's a fascinating question to end with because me and Sarah went on a real journey with this, and I think at times Sarah was maybe more initially, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, Sarah, like in the camp of let's make this for all children, all children from diverse background. And I strongly believed that we should do something that was specifically for Black and mixed heritage children. Because like I said earlier on in our conversation, I believe that there are specific things that Black and mixed heritage children experience that are unique to them. And I feel like sometimes we can feel bad about doing things for one group and not for others.
Yeah.
But actually, I believe strongly that making life better for Black and mixed heritage children will make life better for everybody. I really do believe that. And part of this conversation is that, we see Black men routinely sort of murdered. We all watched a 7-minute video of a Black man being executed, if you like. And that was a very specific thing. It was because he was a Black man. It wasn't because he was an Asian man or an Eastern European man. It's because it's what his Black skin represented to that police officer. And so I think we have to be intentional about addressing that because it's been neglected for sort of long enough. But that was my kind of journey with that, really.
I think also it wasn't so much, I didn't think it should have been for all children. I knew I wanted it to be for mixed heritage and Black children, but it was the wording that I was a little bit uncomfortable with because it is so like Black and mixed heritage children. And I was like, oh, is people going to feel, that we're sort of like on the bandwagon waving a banner saying, look at us, we need help. And I think what Replenish is it's a celebration of Black and mixed heritage children. It's about celebrating their worth, that they're seen, and about offering a different resource. It's not we're asking for more, we're just asking for different, and it's very much if somebody identifies as Black or mixed heritage and they've got kinky coily hair, then our boxes and they can come on our platform, they can ask us questions and stuff like that, if that's what they, that they want to do. But it's, I think James was very intentional on putting Black and mixed heritage children, because I think we need to stop pussyfooting around. We need to make it very intentional.
Thank you. With hindsight, that should have been my first question, shouldn't it? That was any sort of interviewer.
Well, I was just going to say as well, there is an element of staying in your own lane as well, isn't there? I mean, you can't really, if you had someone who was, say, of Chinese heritage join you, then you could, between the three of you, you could say Black, mixed race, and Chinese or Indian or whatever. So I guess there is an element of staying in your own lane. I wouldn't talk about kinship care with experience because I've never looked after someone from my family kind of thing. So I guess there is an element of that as well, is there?
Yeah, I think you're definitely sort of hinting at something around. Actually, we have lived experience as me as a Black man and Sarah as a mixed heritage lady. But I think what we were seeing in the kind of fostering space, the children's service space, it wasn't it wasn't specific to Chinese children or to Asian children. You know, they're not overrepresented in the care system.
Yeah.
And Black and mixed heritage children are. So it needed to be specific to the context as well.
No, that's absolutely fair. Well, I, for one, hope to see this discussed further, because you've actually made me feel better about being scared to talk about it, and I shouldn't be. Not that I shouldn't be, but you know what I'm saying. Like,
I think you should.
It's language. It's language. At the end of the day, it is language, and I'm very conscious of it. You know,
I've done a panel back in last January. I'd done a panel, and I researched because I was up on a panel with I don't class myself as very educated, but the people on the panel were like Blair was on the panel as well. So yeah, so it was.
Oh, well, I wasn't that educated then.
I didn't want to say that, but I was thinking it. That's terrible.
I never said that.
Shout out to Blair. He's a legend.
I'm going to message him now and apologise.
I had to do a bit of research on sort of some of my terminology, because obviously, you know, I'm middle-aged, you know, and, you know, back in the day, you know, mixed race people were called something else, you know, Black people were called something else. I didn't want to offend anybody, so I really had to do a bit of, and I was so nervous because I was like, oh my God, what if it just said, what if I say something and it's like everyone just looks at me, and because it's really scary, and it's this whole thing, it's a hot potato.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a really scary conversation, because we know in society people get cancelled if they say the wrong thing.
Yeah,
but I think if you're saying it in a way of, can I say this? Am I using the right terminology?
Yeah.
You're not just saying something. And I mean, we did have an incident, didn't we, James, when we done a training. I don't know if you want to fill that in a little bit. It was quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, you know, somebody used a racial slur, and you know, we had to address that and say, well, actually, that term isn't acceptable to use. But yeah, I think there's a lot in terminology, and I think as well, to be honest, the terminology changes so quickly. You know, before it was acceptable to say BAME. Now it's not acceptable to say BAME. So I think we always have to.
It's news to Scott.
You can tell I live on the west coast of Ireland, because I didn't know that.
There you go. We've added so much value in this conversation.
Everyone's going, what? BAME?
I'm not sure that's a phrase that's used here very much on it anyway, but I'll just remember not to use it when I come back to the UK now. And you're right, because, you know, and we've had Dr. Paul Shuttleworth on here, and he identifies as queer, and I don't identify that. And I find that as a term quite offensive, but it's actually a very well used, very.
I find it offensive as well.
I do, and I can't.
Growing up, that you would say to cut somebody down.
Yeah, exactly,
you know?
and that's how I feel about it. You see, but you know, each to their own. That's what I say. But you know, and I think when you're referring to somebody, they have to be comfortable with how you're referring to them, and you know, if. Yeah, that's another podcast, I think. Actually,
language series of podcasts, that one.
But listen, James, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I've really enjoyed it. I genuinely have, and I honestly hope to see this, like, you know, grow for you both, and for the children effectively that you're kind of looking out for, because, you know, foster caring is hard enough without having to, you know, think about all the things that we discussed tonight. So thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it. And
thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. Right.
It really has. We love these conversations. We love to sort of, like, I suppose, pick people's imagination and let them start thinking about maybe the other side of what goes on, that they might not have thought about. It's me and James's bread and butter, isn't it, James?
Yep, that's one way of one good terminology to use.
Bread and butter and passion.
That's still acceptable. Bread and butter. There you go.
Bread and butter.
Well, let me just check quickly.
Yeah. We'll get complaints. We'll get letters.
Yeah.
I have to say one thing before we go. I think James sold himself a little bit short when he said, I'm just a social worker and I was the social worker manager. He had an inept way of speaking to foster carers that made them know that they were being listened to. And I think he's left now. I think it's the second year now that he's not there, and he is sadly missed still. He's still that whisper in the corridors, you're not James. we say to managers.
Is your annual review due? Because I can comment on that. It's going to be you'd be in trouble.
My head's not going to fit
yourself
through the
short,
door.
James. Don't sell yourself short.
No, I'm not.
You're amazing. I couldn't have done this on my own. I couldn't have done Replenish Culture on my own. I would love to have thought that I could, but I know I couldn't. And I think as a partnership, foster care and social worker, we hit it at both ends, you know?
Probably spark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
listen,
I
can I have the final note?
Well, yeah. Just
Yeah,
go
go
on.
on.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a podcast we couldn't end.
Sarah's made me blush, so I have to make her blush now. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think one of my favorite parts of this has been a unlikely collaboration between a social worker and a foster carer. But Sarah isn't just any foster carer. I think she's a credit to the fostering space, really. So it's been a real privilege.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Like
appreciate it.
Scott,
I'm
when you're
listening
listening to that,
James.
Yeah.
I sent you the money, PayPal.
Scott, when you're listening to that, that's how people can be nice to each other?
Yeah, I know. But it's also like where we're at as well, because you're a social worker and I'm not. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
I don't think we can.
This dry sense of humour you guys have got.
I
know, it's
I'm
terrible,
pretty sure
really,
we
but-
can't put ourselves in the same league as these two.
No, not really.
No. And
Well
on
done,
that
guys.
bombshell,
Yes.
thank you so much, and have a great night, and we'll speak to you soon.
How do you make the sparks go? Go on.
This is podcast gold because nobody can see it, but we're putting our thumbs up on Zoom to make the fireworks
Yeah,
come
it's
out.
not
It's not
working.
working.
Fireworks.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Go on,
Yeah.
get lost.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.